The sky was never truly dark here. It was a restless wound in the firmament, bleeding violet and ash-gray, clouds boiling as if the heavens themselves were at war. Smoke from promethium refineries choked the horizon, burning the lungs and stinging the eyes. Ash fell like snow, not soft, not gentle, but sharp, like powdered glass. We, the people of this world, had long ago learned to live with choking skies and poison winds. The Emperor demanded endurance, and so we endured. The administratum tallied our lives not in names, but in numbers, quotas, labor hours, tithe shipments. 1 billion souls ground into dust for the Imperium's war machine. And then he arrived. At first, we thought it was another storm, a bright fracture in the polluted heavens. The air split with a crack like worlds colliding, a streak of burning crimson fire tearing across the sky. Not a ship, not a meteor, something faster, sharper, alive. It burned against the night, then vanished, only to reappear an instant later miles away. The priests told us to avert our eyes. They hissed of witchcraft, of warp things wearing flesh. Some fell to their knees in prayer, others clutched their ration bread tighter, as if faith or hunger might shield them. But I saw him. I saw the man who moved faster than thought. His boots struck the ash dunes with a thunderclap. Dust spiraled around him, shredded apart by speed itself. His crimson form blurred, shimmering like a phantom between heartbeats. The Flash, though none of us knew that name, stood alien in our world of misery. His face carried the innocence of another universe, the expression of a man who still believed in saving lives. That was his first mistake, because in this place no one is saved. In this millennium, salvation is heresy. The Arbites declared him a mutant before the sun set. The ecclesiarchy shrieked that he was warp-tainted, a demon wrapped in false flesh. Even the people, our people who had starved and bled under imperial rule, whispered in fear. Not wonder, not hope, fear. And they were right to fear. For though the red-clad stranger moved with the speed of lightning, though he could snatch a bullet from the air and run faster than orbital bombardments could fall, none of that mattered. Not here. Not in the galaxy where gods feed on souls, where entire planets burn in minutes, where speed means nothing against eternity. He thought he had outrun death itself. But in the 41st millennium, death is the only constant. And so begins the story of the fastest man alive, in the slow, grinding nightmare of the far future. But that was only the beginning. He did not know how it happened. One moment he had been running, his body vibrating against the very fabric of the Speed Force, chasing something, or perhaps fleeing. He remembered light, endless light, fracturing into threads of scarlet and gold. Then nothing but the wrenching sensation of being torn apart and reassembled across infinity. And when his vision returned, he was here, not in Central City, not even on his Earth, but on a world that smelled of rust, blood, and fear. The ground beneath him was cracked ferrocrete, littered with bones. Towering habblocks leaned like rotten teeth, their upper levels lost in smoke. Chains hung across the plazas like banners of despair. Everywhere, loudspeakers screamed sermons of the God Emperor, their vox units distorting into static-laden shrieks. Work for his glory, die for his glory. Fear him, and you shall be saved. The Flash had seen crime, war, even alien invasion, but never this. The sheer weight of oppression crushed the very air. The people shuffled with heads bowed, eyes hollow, skin thin from hunger. Guards in flak armor, arbitrators with shock mauls and shotguns, patrolled every corner, their visors blank, their gestures brutal. He tried to speak to them. He tried to help. And for that, he was beaten. They had called him mutant before his words left his lips. A baton struck his ribs. A shotgun muzzle pressed against his skull. Only instinct saved him, his body vibrating, slipping through the strike like smoke. He disarmed them in a heartbeat, stripped weapons from their hands, scattered them across the plaza. Not harming them, only neutralizing, always holding back. But that restraint was meaningless here. The people did not cheer. They screamed. They scattered. Mothers dragged their children into alleys. The Arbites scrambled back to their feet, howling for reinforcements. Sirens wailed across the hab blocks. And in that instant, the Flash understood. He was not a hero here. He was an abomination. Here, the first betrayal, he found shelter that night among the forgotten. The laborers who sifted ash for scraps of metal. The children who gnawed at corpse starch like animals. They were the only ones who did not immediately turn him away. They asked who he was, and he told them, "I'm here to help. I want to protect you." They laughed, not out of joy but despair. "Protect us? Then you are already dead." For 3 nights, he hid among them, moving only when the Arbite's patrols drew near. He stole food from the rations depot, faster than any eye could see, dropping loaves of stale bread and cracked water pouches into the hands of children. They called him the Red Ghost, but mercy cannot stay hidden for long. On the 4th night, they betrayed him. The eldest among them, a man with 1 arm and a dozen scars across his face, whispered to the ecclesiarchy. A hairtech bounty was promised, fuel, rations, the privilege of survival. When the priests came, robed in incense smoke, the crippled man pointed with his stump and spat. There, the witch, the ghost. The Flash tried not to fight. He tried only to run. But the priests had brought hunters, sanctioned psychers, their eyes glowing with warp light, their tongues whispering curses that felt like claws in his brain. He staggered, felt blood trickle from his nose, tasted iron on his tongue. For the first time in his life, Barry Allen realized that speed alone was not enough. Candle the myth begins. He escaped. Barely. His body blurred through the smoke, zigzagging across spires, rivers of ash, machine yards that churned without pause. Behind him, sirens still screamed his name. But to the people, the story was already changing. The Red Ghost became a whispered myth. Some said he was a saint, sent by the Emperor to test their faith. Others said he was a demon, a trickster spirit born from the warp. Children scrawled his image on broken walls, a crimson streak against black stone. The ecclesiarchy burned those children alive. Every act of kindness he attempted only worsened the suffering of those around him. Every attempt to save someone condemned them as heretics. And still he ran. Not because he believed he could win, but because stopping meant accepting this world, and that he could never do. But this was only the beginning, because the machinery of oppression had noticed him now, and the Imperium does not forgive. The days here blur together, like ash carried by the wind. There is no dawn, only a sickly glow that crawls across the clouds. The sun never shines. It is strangled by smoke before its light can reach us. We rise when the klaxons scream. Not a gentle call, not a bell, but a shrieking metallic roar that drills into the skull, echoing across the hab blocks. The sound is less a signal, more a threat. Wake or be found sleeping, the Flash asked once, in his too bright, too human voice. Why does it sound like that? Why not something softer, like an alarm clock? None of us answered. We only stared. Some laughed, but not from humor, from disbelief that a man could still imagine softness. Bread hunger, we shuffle into the ration lines. Corpse starch, that is the word. A paste, gray and tasteless, pressed into blocks. They say it is recycled protein. We do not ask from where. Some whisper it comes from the dead. Others say it is harvested from rats, vermin, even from our own waste. The Flash could steal from the depot. He did, at first streaking past guards, returning with arms full of food. To him it was nothing. To us it was death. For when the ration counts did not match, the overseers came. They pulled a dozen at random from the line, dragged them into the square, and beat them to pulp with shock mauls. Their screams echoed until their throats collapsed. Then the bodies were left for a day as a lesson, until the carrion birds came. The Flash never stole again. But the hunger never ended. Our stomachs hollowed, our lips cracked. Children gnawed on the edges of their tunics. Mothers sold their bodies to arbitrators for scraps. Old men chewed leather straps just to taste something other than ash. And all the while he watched, a man faster than light, a man who could run to the stars. Helpless. Hammer work is survival. Every day we are marched into the manufactoria. The air is thick with smoke and oil, the machines screaming so loud they deafen us within months. We feed the forges, hammer metal until our arms split and bleed. Those who collapse are kicked aside. Those who slow are lashed with chains. He asked once, "Why don't you leave? Why don't you run?" We laughed again, not kindly, because there is nowhere to run. The ash wastes stretch for leagues, filled with mutants and worse. Beyond that, the guard patrols shoot deserters without pause. And beyond even that, the void, the warp, the endless night of a galaxy that does not forgive. When he tried to help, he worked faster than any machine. He built 10 men's worth of production in a single hour. He thought he was saving us. The overseers watched and then raised the quota for all. And so we bled more, suffered more. His speed became our punishment. Balance scale punishments. Every day has punishments. A man accused of hoarding rations, whipped until his skin peeled away. A woman who whispered a prayer not in the emperor's words. Tongue torn out, paraded before us. Children caught sleeping during sermon, dragged into the furnace. The Flash tried to intervene once. He stood in front of the arbitrator's lash. The whip cracked and he caught it mid-strike. He thought that would be enough. But then they took the condemned and made it worse. Instead of 1 lashing, they gave him 50. Instead of 1 child, they threw 3. The lesson was clear. Mercy creates more suffering. And so, for the first time, the Flash did nothing. He clenched his fists, his body shaking at the speed of atoms, but he did nothing. Because here, heroism was cruelty. Folded hands, faith at night. When the machines fall silent, the sermons begin. The priests climb their pulpits, their voices amplified by vox horns that crackle with static. They chant of the emperor, the god who sits upon the golden throne, the corpse that rules all things. We are told we are dust, that our pain is his fuel, our death his will. The Flash sat among us, listening, shaking his head. This is madness. He's just a man. Isn't he? Your emperor. Just a man. We gasped. Some crossed themselves in terror. And I swear, for a heartbeat, the walls themselves seemed to shiver, as though the words alone had summoned damnation. The priests dragged him to the altar, demanded he kneel, demanded he praise the throne. He stood silent, his jaw set. They struck him, whipped him, broke rods across his back. The wounds healed instantly. That only made them angrier. They screamed, "Demon! Heretic! Warp spawn!" And the people chanted with them, for fear of being silent. And still he would not kneel. This is what daily life is in the Imperium. And for him, the man who could run faster than gods, it was the first time speed meant nothing. But even this endless cycle of hunger, work, punishment, and prayer was only the surface. Because the machinery that sustains such misery does not run on accident. It is designed, perfected, and sharpened into a weapon. And soon, the Flash would learn how deep that blade truly cuts. The Imperium does not merely rule, crushes. It is a machine built on obedience, sharpened by terror, and sanctified by faith. Every cog is a human life, and every life is expendable. The people call it the order, though the priests name it holiness, and the Arbites call it law. To us, it is simply survival. The Flash saw it differently. He looked at the city and thought it chaos, brutality without reason. He was wrong. Every lash, every sermon, every corpse left hanging from a hab spire, it all served a purpose. A purpose older than memory, obedience. The Arbites, law made flesh, they are the first blade. Arbites patrol in armor black as midnight, visors glowing red like the eyes of judgment. Their boots slam into the ferrocrete with perfect rhythm. They do not smile, do not speak, do not forgive. They are not men, they are the law made flesh. The Flash once tried to disarm them without harm. In less than a heartbeat, their shotguns were empty in his hands, their shock mauls scattered. He smiled, thinking he had shown restraint. Within minutes, the Arbites returned in dozens. Within hours, in hundreds. They do not care about efficiency, nor about loss. They exist to remind us that there is no escape. And when even hundreds failed to catch him, they escalated. Entire blocks of citizens were executed, not because they sheltered him, but because they might have. The message was clear. His defiance writes death upon our streets. Candle the ecclesiarchy, faith as shackles. If the Arbites rule the body, the ecclesiarchy rules the soul. Their priests wear robes woven with gold thread, masks of beaten iron, censers that spill choking incense into the air. Their voices are thunder amplified by vox speakers, warped into divine fury. The Flash would sit among us when the sermons began, his jaw tight, his eyes restless. He whispered once, "Do you not see? They're lying to you. They've built this God out of fear." We did not answer, because we knew the truth. It does not matter if they lie. It matters only that they are believed. The priests weaponize belief like a bolter. They burn the weak to purify the strong. They demand confessions, then twist those words into chains. They declare miracles and manufacture heretics to match them. When the Flash appeared, they declared him a test of faith. Some believed him a saint, more believed him a demon, and the priests fed both sides, for faith thrives in conflict. Gear the overseers, hunger as a blade. Every factory, every mine, every hablock has its overseers. Men and women who once starved beside us, now given scraps of power and the right to inflict cruelty. They are worse than Arbites, worse than priests. They are us, broken and remade into knives against one another. The Flash did not understand this. He saved one overseer from a collapsing forge, dragging him from fire faster than the flames could spread. The man spat in his face, then reported him to the priests. Because in this world, gratitude is treason. Kindness is weakness. Survival means betrayal. Performing arts, ritual, and spectacle. The Imperium does not kill in silence. Kills in theater. Public executions are parades. Heretic burnings are carnivals. The people are forced to watch, to chant, to cheer. If you do not cheer loudly enough, you are next. The Flash tried to disrupt one such spectacle. He freed a line of prisoners before the torch touched their pyres. In seconds, he carried them miles away into the wastes, giving them a chance at freedom. By the next day, their heads were displayed on pikes outside the city gates. He did not understand, and perhaps still does not, that in this world, every act of defiance births a punishment tenfold worse. Irony of power. The cruelest irony is this. The Imperium does not need to catch him. It does not need to chain his speed or silence his defiance. It only needs to let him live long enough to see the truth. That his power is not liberation. That his mercy is death to those he saves. That the very act of running writes more names onto the execution lists. And slowly, inevitably, he begins to grasp it. For all his speed, he is trapped in a machine designed not to be outrun. But the machine is not unchallenged. For beyond the city walls, storms gather. Warp light flickers across the skies. And when the true horrors arrive, we will learn what his speed is worth against eternity itself. It began with whispers, not the sermons of priests, nor the threats of overseers, but whispers in the air itself. The hablock vents carried them, the cracks in the ferrocrete hummed with them. Voices that were not voices, promising, mocking, begging. Children woke screaming, clawing at their own ears. The Flash heard them too. For a man who can hear the world in vibrations, the whispers were deafening. They hissed his name, stretching it into blasphemy. Bayeri, ruin, ruin? Cloud with lightning. The first storm one night. The skies tore open. A warp storm. To us, it was the end of the world. The clouds split into wounds of light, violet and green fire licking across the horizon. The air smelled of rot and ozone. The ground shivered, as if the planet itself was trying to flee. Machines failed. Vox units screamed static. The priests declared it divine wrath. The Arbites locked down the city, shooting anyone who tried to leave. And then they came. Drop of blood. The raiders were not human. Not anymore. Their flesh rippled with horns, spines, and wings. Their weapons were jagged bone fused with iron. They descended like carrion birds, screaming praises to gods whose names we dare not speak. Chaos. The Flash had never seen war like this. He moved faster than sight, tearing weapons from clawed hands, scattering raiders across the ash. He thought his speed would save us. It did not. For every one he struck down, 10 more poured through the storm. And when he carried civilians to safety, he found there was no safety. The raiders burned entire blocks for sport, herded children into cages, carved symbols into living flesh. He saved dozens that night, but thousands died screaming. Fire, the scent of blood, the air reeked of iron and smoke. Blood steamed in gutters. The cries of the dying rose higher than the sermons ever had. The priests told us to rejoice, to see our deaths as offerings. The Arbites fought until they were torn apart, their black armor split like eggshells. The Flash ran himself ragged, vibrating through walls, striking faster than eyes could follow. He was everywhere at once, and yet, everywhere was already burning. At last, he stood panting, crimson suit torn and stained, surrounded by fire. He whispered, I can't keep up. I can't save them all. And we, the broken, already knew. We had known since birth. Axed the ritual on the third day of the storm, the raiders began their ritual. They dragged prisoners to the plaza, hundreds at first, then thousands. Circles were carved into the ferrocrete with their blood. Candles of fat burned, smoke rising in patterns that hurt the eyes. The priests screamed at the Flash to act, not in defiance, but in desperation. Prove yourself a saint. Stop them. Prove your worth. So he ran, faster than light, faster than thought. He tore apart chains, scattered captors, shattered ritual icons. But chaos does not need completion. It only needs attempts. The blood had already been spilled, the prayers already spoken. The sky split wider. A hand, vast, clawed, dripping with fire, reached through. Not a raider, not a man, but something infinite. Something that should never touch mortal soil. The Flash froze. For the first time since he arrived, he did not move. For even speed means nothing against gods. Milky Way, the escape, he ran anyway. He had no choice. Not to fight, not to win, but to drag as many as he could from the city before it vanished beneath the claw. His movements blurred into crimson arcs across the wastelands, carrying hundreds, then thousands. His lungs burned, his muscles screamed, his heart threatened to tear itself apart. And still, he was too slow. For when he looked back, the city was gone. Not burned, not broken, gone. The warp had swallowed it whole. The survivors wept. The priests called it the Emperor's judgment. The Arbites who remained shot deserters for cowardice. And the Flash stood silent, ash blowing across his torn suit, his eyes hollow. For the first time, he realized what we had always known. Here, no matter how fast you run, horror always arrives faster. But the horrors were not over. For the tools and weapons of this world are built not to save, but to remind us of our chains. And soon, the Flash would understand their meaning. The Imperium does not craft weapons for elegance. Crafts them for fear. Each blade, each firearm, each relic is not only a tool of death but a sermon carved into steel. To hold one is to be reminded of your place. As servant, as soldier, as sacrifice. The Flash could never understand at first. He looked at their weapons and saw brutality where there should have been precision. But to us, to the people of this world, the brutality is the precision. Pistol, the lost gun is the most common of all. A weapon of light. Not elegant like the Flash's lightning, not pure energy, but a dull red beam that stings and burns. Soldiers carry them in ranks, firing in unison like a choir of death. The Flash once disarmed a platoon in the time it takes to blink. Dozens of lost guns clattered to the ground. He laughed, calling them glorified flashlights. And then he watched as the soldiers, unarmed, charged with bayonets instead. They did not fight for victory. They fought for fear of execution if they failed. He stopped laughing. Hammer shock mauls and chains, the Arbites wield shock mauls. Blunt rods that crackle with power, strong enough to break bone and nerve in one strike. They are not weapons of war, but weapons of law. Their purpose is not to kill, but to humiliate, to punish, to remind. Chains are everywhere, around necks, wrists, ankles. Overseers carry them as whips. Priests carry them as holy relics. We are chained to machines, chained to walls, chained to one another. The Flash once broke an entire line of chains in seconds, freeing dozens. The overseers arrived with more chains before he could even breathe. Because in the Imperium, chains are infinite. Chains, symbols of faith. The Aquila, the double-headed eagle, stares from every wall, every coin, every soldier's chest. Its wings spread wide, as if it might shield us. But we know the truth. Its eyes look in opposite directions, watching for heresy from all sides. The priests wear skulls around their necks. Real skulls. Human, animal, it does not matter. Death itself is a symbol. We are told to wear purity seals, scraps of parchment marked with prayers, pinned to flesh or armor. The Flash asked once, "What good are scraps of paper?" And we answered, "The paper doesn't protect us. The fear of not wearing it does." Crossed swords, the blade of the heretic. The raiders from the storm carried weapons far worse. Axes of rusted iron that dripped with fire. Blades that screamed as they cut. Guns that spat not bullets, but worms of flesh that burrowed into their victims. The Flash, in his speed, tried to disarm them, but the weapons clung like living things, hissing and twisting. When he threw them away, they crawled back to their masters. Even his lightning, his beautiful golden arcs of power, seemed small beside weapons that were alive with hatred. Joker irony and mockery sometimes. The worst cruelty comes not from strength, but from mockery. I once saw an overseer carry a relic, a hammer shaped like a child's toy, painted in bright colors. Each time it struck, it shattered bone. He laughed as he used it. The Flash stared, horrified. He could not understand how a weapon could be a joke. But in this world, cruelty becomes comedy. Suffering becomes entertainment. The realization to the Flash, weapons were always something to be avoided, neutralized, outrun. But here, they are not simply tools of battle. They are chains of meaning. Every blade says, "You are weak." Every skull says, "You are prey." Every symbol says, "There is no escape." And though he could disarm them all in a heartbeat, he could not disarm the meaning. But weapons are wielded by hands, and those hands are driven by desperation, fear, betrayal. The true horror was not the tools of war, but the people who used them, and how quickly they turned on one another. And soon, the Flash would learn what it means to trust and be betrayed.
At first, when the Flash appeared among us, we thought him an angel, a red figure who moved faster than the eye, who broke chains and struck down overseers in the span of a single heartbeat. Whispers spread like wildfire through the hablocks. The Emperor has sent us a champion. Children carved lightning bolts into the dust. Mothers wept at the sight of men freed from torture racks. Even the most broken among us dared to hope. But in the Imperium, hope is not a gift. It is a death sentence. The spark of resistance, with the Flash at our side. Small victories bloomed. Food caches were stolen from the overseers and delivered to the starving. A worker who collapsed at his station was carried home before the lash could fall. Chains were shattered in the night, and slaves woke free for the first time in years. He spoke to us in words we barely understood, but his tone was clear. You don't have to live like this. Together, you can fight back. And for a moment, it worked. We felt human again. But the Imperium does not allow resistance, and chaos does not allow hope. The price of trust. It began with whispers. Who was this red demon who moved too fast to be seen? Was he a Xenos? A servant of the dark gods in disguise? Fear spread faster than his lightning, and when fear takes root, betrayal follows. One man, desperate to feed his family, reported the Flash to the overseers. He claimed he knew where the red demon slept. The Arbits stormed the Habs that night, dragging 10 innocents away. They were burned alive in the streets. The traitor received a loaf of bread as payment. By morning, his throat was slit by his own neighbors. The Flash had freed us, but he had also cursed us. The Arbits Wrathwin. The Arbits learned of him. They did not call him a hero. They called him heretic, mutant, warp dash, tainted. They came in force. Shock malls crackling, shotguns booming, skull helms glaring. They arrested entire families, demanding, "Where is the red demon? Where is the runner?" The Flash, horrified, tried to fight without killing. He struck weapons from hands, scattered men like leaves in the wind. But the Arbites did not retreat. They advanced over the bodies of the innocent, using the crowd as shields. For every man he saved, 3 more were punished. The chains of fear ran so. Betrayal grew, not out of hatred, but survival. Neighbors turned on neighbors. Mothers pointed to strangers. Brothers whispered against brothers. All it took was the promise of one more day alive, or the fear of dying with the wrong crowd. The Flash did not understand. In his world, betrayal was rare, a shocking crime. Here, it was daily bread. He begged us to stay united, but unity is fragile when every shadow hides a listening ear, seeds of resistance, and, yet, even in the choking ash of betrayal, resistance remained. A few still believed. A few still whispered prayers, not to the Emperor, but to the Red Angel who moved like lightning. We hid him in the tunnels, beneath the Manufactoria. We fed him scraps, taught him our prayers, painted the lightning bolt beside the Aquila in secret. Children carried messages. Because no one suspects a starving child, we believed, we resisted, and we knew the noose would tighten. The Flash learns the truth in time. The Flash realized what we had always known. This is not a world where you can save everyone. This is not a war that can be won with speed alone. Here, every act of kindness makes you a target. Every victory brings 1,000 lashes. Every spark of hope calls down the storm, and in that storm, we saw it in his eyes, the first shadow of doubt. Betrayal had broken him, but worse still was coming. For even his speed could not escape the blood-soaked traditions of this galaxy. And so began his descent into the rituals, sacrifice, and cruelty of Warhammer40K. The Imperium is not merely an empire, it is a religion. Every command, every lash, every drop of blood spilled in the dust is justified in the name of the Emperor. And when the Flash first beheld one of their rituals, he realized speed meant nothing against belief sharpened into a weapon. The purge of the innocent Sith began with a decree. 100 laborers had gone missing in the night, freed by the Flash's hand. The Arbites called it heresy. The priests called it warp-taint, so they made their response holy. We were herded into the square. Ash fell like snow. The smell of burning promethium filled our throats. At the center stood a pyre, piled high with kindling and corpses of those already beaten half to death. The ecclesiarch raised his staff, his vox grill echoing across the crowd. The Emperor protects, the Emperor purges. And through fire, he cleanses the mutant filth. The condemned screamed as they burned, not in rage, not in defiance, but in the sound of animals who already knew their lives were less than nothing. The Flash tried to intervene. He darted forward, too fast for the Arbites to see, snapping ropes, pulling bodies from the fire. But then the priests began chanting, and the crowd joined them. They weren't afraid of death. They were afraid of him. To them, he was the reason this suffering had begun. He was the lightning that drew the storm, and so he stood frozen, ash swirling around him, his hands trembling. For the first time, Barry Allen understood. Here, even miracles are punishable by fire. Rituals of Bloodite was not only the Imperium. Chaos was watching. Cultists crept from the under, faces painted with gore, whispering praises to their dark gods. They had seen the red figure who ran faster than thought. To them, he was no hero. He was an omen. They wanted his blood. One night, he stumbled into their rites, a circle of screaming fanatics, knives tearing flesh from their own arms, their blood daubed on rusted walls. In the center lay a bound child, sobbing. The Flash didn't hesitate. He struck the cultists like lightning, breaking bones, scattering bodies. He freed the child, but the chanting did not stop. It grew louder, because the sacrifice had been fulfilled. It did not matter who bled, so long as blood flowed. The warp rippled. The air stank of copper and rot, and from the shadows, something clawed its way into reality. A demon, born not of flesh, but of ritual. Its laughter was the sound of knives drawn across glass, and the Flash realized he had not saved the child, he had fed the ritual. Cruelty is doctrine in this galaxy. Cruelty is not a crime, it is order, it is structure. The Arbites scourged us for failing quotas. The priests flogged us for faltering prayers. Overseers executed workers not to punish, but to inspire. One man fell asleep at his station. They flayed his skin from his back and nailed it above the manufactorum doors as a warning. His wife was forced to recite hymns beneath it until her voice broke, and every time the Flash tried to intervene, the punishment only worsened. Speed could steal bread. Speed could break chains. But speed could not outrun the logic of cruelty, because here, cruelty was not madness, it was faith. Barry's breaking point. After weeks of watching these rituals, Barry Allen stopped smiling. He stopped promising freedom. He stopped saying, "I'll protect you." He began to understand the truth. This was not his world, and his rules did not apply. He was not the fastest man alive. He was just another soul trapped in the galaxy's endless ritual of blood and fire. But if the Imperium had broken him, the warp had not yet finished its work, for whispers had begun to follow him. Whispers in the ash, whispers in the lightning. And soon, the Flash would learn that even his own speed was not beyond corruption. That was the beginning of the chaos per. Warp influence corruption. The warp is a sea without bottom, a storm without horizon. Every thought, every dream, every flicker of fear bleeds into its tides. And when the Flash ran, when his boots tore across the poisoned earth, and the world blurred into lightning, the warp noticed up, because in this universe, nothing escapes the gaze of gods that feed on souls. The whispers in the Speed Force. Barry had always felt the Speed Force like a heartbeat, a hum of energy guiding his every step. It was order, balance, the rhythm of a cosmos that made sense. But here, in the 41st millennium, that rhythm faltered. The hum became whispers, and the whispers became voices. At first, they were faint, like echoes in the back of his mind. Faster, Barry, always faster. They will never thank you, only we understand. Each time he ran, the voices grew clearer, louder. They told him he was not saving these people. He was wasting his gift on cattle. That he could be more. That he could be endless. And when he tried to ignore them, they laughed. Chaos does not tempt with lies. It tempts with truths. Twisted into knives, the voices showed him visions as he ran. Entire regiments of soldiers frozen in place while he moved between seconds. A planet falling into fire, and him standing untouched at its heart. Armies kneeling, not in chains, but in worship. They whispered names. Korn, the god of endless battle. Slaanesh, the god of sensation. The Inch, the god of change. Nurgle, the god of eternity. Each offered him a gift. Korn promised that his speed could become slaughter. Slaanesh promised he could feel every moment forever. To see promised knowledge of the infinite paths of time. Nurgle promised he would never tire, never die, never stop. All he had to do was choose. The first stumble, the corruption began small. One night, the Arbites cornered a group of starving children. Barry moved faster than ever before. But in his anger, in his desperation, he miscalculated. His hand tore through an Arbit's chest. The man's body split apart like paper. The children screamed, not in joy, not in relief, but in terror. Because in the 41st millennium, mercy and horror are often indistinguishable. Barry froze, staring at the blood on his hands. And in the silence that followed, he heard it. A new voice, low and hungry. See, you are not. The warp is patient. The warp is eternal. and the faster he ran, the deeper he fell into its embrace. He thought his speed had made him free, but in the 41st millennium, even the fastest man alive cannot outrun gods that do not die. And so begins the dark tales, the legends, myths, and famous examples, stories whispered about the Red Angel of Speed, hero, heretic, and monster, all at once. They say once, on a mining moon besieged by orcs, an entire Imperial Guard regiment was slaughtered in the span of 12 heartbeats. The survivors speak of a red streak, tearing across the battlefield, faster than bullets, faster than artillery. Guardsmen swore the Red Angel ran into the orc horde, ripping tusked heads from shoulders, scattering bodies like chaff. But when the smoke cleared, the guardsmen were dead too, not cut down by orc chappas, but by wounds too clean, too fast, too sharp to be orc work. The priests declared it proof of demonic intervention. The soldiers whispered a darker truth. The Red Angel killed everyone, friend and foe alike, and none could stop him. Legend 2. The Lightning Martyr in Hive City Archives. Forbidden texts describe a different story. They claimed the Red Angel once gave himself up to the Arbites, dragged in chains before a cardinal. He spoke words no one remembered, but all agreed he begged for mercy, not for himself, but for the starving people of the Hive. The cardinal laughed, declaring him a mutant cursed by the warp. They burned him alive before a crowd of thousands, and yet, as the flames consumed him, lightning split the sky. When the pyre was nothing but ash, the chains lay empty. Some swear he died that day. Others believe he still runs, forever burning, forever screaming, a martyr that can never truly die. Legend 3. The War-prone Earth heretics tell a different tale. In the whispers of chaos cults, the Red Angel is not a victim, but a chosen one. They say he ran so fast he tore open reality itself, a living portal to the warp. Through him, demons poured into the Hive, feasting on flesh and fire. His speed was no longer mortal, but eternal, gifted by T-Sench himself, making him the herald of change. Cultists still carve his lightning bolt into their flesh, crying out prayers to the Warpruner, who will one day return, not as a man, but as a god of endless motion. The weight of myth. Which of these stories is true? All of them. Or none of them. Because in the 41st millennium, legends are stronger than facts. In the flesh, the man once called Barry Allen became not a hero, not a villain, but a myth, a name whispered in fear and awe, a symbol of how even the purest power cannot survive the galaxy's endless cruelty. But myths do not end, they only grow darker, and so we come at last to the philosophical reflection and closing, where his tale finds its final, tragic weight in another universe. Barry Allen was a symbol of hope. He ran not only to save lives, but to prove that, even in the darkest of nights, there is light if one can only move fast enough to reach it. But the 41st millennium is not his world here. There is no finish line, no justice, no salvation. The weight of speed. What is speed in a galaxy ruled by eternity? What is a heartbeat when empires fall in millennia? What is the fastest man alive when gods that do not die feast on every fleeting soul? The truth is cruel in its simplicity. Speed is nothing. Hope is nothing. All things end in the same silence. The Red Angel's fate. Some say Barry Allen still runs, trapped forever between seconds, his body a streak of lightning that can never stop. Others claim he was swallowed whole by the warp, his soul torn into endless copies, each running down a different cursed timeline. And some whisper that he chose his end, that in the moment of choice, he let himself burn out rather than bend knee to the dark gods. But in the end, it does not matter which tale is true, because the Imperium has already forgotten his name. The Administratum recorded only a single word in its endless archives: anomaly. That is all the galaxy allows him to be. The closing reflection. And so, what happens when the Flash lands in Warhammer 40K? The same thing that happens to all who dream of heroes. He is broken. He is consumed. He becomes a story told in whispers, twisted by fear, worship, or hate. In his speed, he thought he could outrun death. But in the 41st millennium, death is the only constant, and the faster you run, the faster it finds you. We endure until we cannot, and even the fastest man alive cannot outrun the slow grind of despair. The air reeked of smoke and old blood. Every street of the hive was etched with lightning scars now, reminders of the Red Phantom who appeared in an instant and was gone in the next. Some called him Deliverer, others called him Executioner. All agreed on one thing: wherever he ran, death followed. The riot at Manufactorum Deltanine. It began with bread, always with bread. The tithe quotas had risen again, and rations were cut in half. Mothers fought in the mud over a fist-sized loaf. Children gnawed on bark. Men murdered for the scraps left in refuse piles. When the Arbites arrived to restore order, they brought fire. Shockmalls cracked skulls. Shotguns blew apart the hungry like vermin. And then he came. The flash moved through them like a storm, unchained, tearing weapons away, hurling men into walls, leaving trails of scorched concrete behind his boots. To the starving, he was a god. To the Arbites, he was a demon. But when it ended, the Manufactorum was silent. The Arbites lay broken in heaps, and so did the workers, trampled in the chaos, burned in the flames. Lightning arcs had fried circuits, collapsing an entire tower upon those too weak to flee. The Flash stood amid the rubble, staring at what he had wrought, whispering to himself, I didn't mean to." The birth of the cult of survivors began to kneel, not to the Emperor, to him. Children smeared ash across their faces in the shape of his lightning bolt. Old men sang hymns in a language of static and sparks. Women tore scraps of crimson cloth to bind as talismans. They called him the Lightning Saint. Barry begged them to stop. He shouted, pleaded, wept. But the more he denied his divinity, the stronger their faith grew. In the Imperium, saints are not chosen. They are made by suffering, carved from blood and fire, and in their eyes, he had been carved perfectly. The shadow of chaos asterisk, but the warp was listening, and it laughed. The cult of the lightning. Saints spread whispers through the underhive. Whispers became chants. Chants became rituals. They offered blood in his name, believing he would protect them. He never asked for it, but the warp doesn't care what you ask for. Every drop of blood fed the echo that clung to him. A storm of whispers circling in his wake. You see, Barry? They worship you already. Just accept it. Just run faster. Just give in. The turning point when the Inquisition arrived. It was not a question of guilt. It was a question of fire. Thousands were herded into the streets. Purity seals crackled as flamers were lit. The cult of the Lightning Saint was condemned to ash. Barry ran into the inferno, screaming for them to stop, dragging bodies away faster than eyes could follow. But for every one he saved, 10 more burned. And when the smoke cleared, he stood, surrounded by corpses, his hands bloodied, his suit torn, his voice hoarse. The Inquisitor pointed and declared, "Behold, the heretic's angel," and the crowd believed. Closing hook of chapter 11. Barry's legend was no longer his own. It had been twisted into a weapon by the desperate, by the faithful, by the warp itself. He was no longer Barry Allen. He was no longer the Flash. He was the lightning that burns, and the galaxy would never let him be anything else. The sky was no longer sky. It was a bruise of violet and green, streaked with lightning that wasn't his own. Warp lightning danced along the spires of the hive, touching metal and flesh alike, twisting everything it kissed. The Flash ran along the shattered streets, faster than thought, faster than fear. Yet no speed could outrun what had already begun to crawl into his mind. The warp beckons it began as whispers again, soft and seductive. You are alone. You are all You can change this world if you take what is offered. Barry shook his head, trying to clear the voices. But the warp does not speak in clear words. It seeps into your thoughts, infecting the rhythm of your heartbeat, the hum of the speed force. Each street he crossed trembled beneath him. Buildings warped. Shadows stretched unnaturally, forming faces that pleaded and laughed at the same time. And from the sky, something reached down, not a hand, not a weapon, a void of hunger, clawing at reality itself. The cults multiply. The cult of the Lightning Saint had grown beyond control. Whole sectors of the hive now prayed to him as God, offering flesh, blood, and obedience. They no longer saw him as a savior. He was a symbol of inevitability. Children ran beside him, screaming prayers. Mothers dragged their sick along, calling him deliverer. Soldiers cursed him for the chaos he left in his wake. Barry tried to speak to them, to plead, to correct the misunderstanding. But words cannot undo legend. The Inquisition strikes, and then the Inquisitor came. Thousands of heretics, fanatics, and civilians were slaughtered in the streets as the Inquisition stamped its authority. Flamers, bolters, and meltagains tore the hive apart. Barry ran into the fire again, faster than ever, shielding as many as he could. He tore apart weapons, disrupted squads, and created miracles in motion. But for every one life saved, dozens more died, and the whispers of the warp grew louder. You are too slow. You cannot save them. None can. Convergence of horrors as Barry ran. The warp began to manifest physically. Rifts tore open along the streets, leaking demonic forms that shimmered and shrieked. Reality buckled, making him run in circles even as he tried to escape. Time itself felt fractured. He ran forward, yet found himself back at the manufactorium where he had first freed the children. Faces he thought he saved stared at him, twisted and hollow, and he realized the horrifying truth. He could save no one, not because he was slow, but because this universe did not allow salvation. The fracture within, the more he tried, the more he became part of the warp storm. The whispers were no longer voices outside him. They were inside, telling him to act, to embrace, to run faster than the universe itself. And yet, every act of speed, every miraculous rescue, only fed the mythos, turning him into both savior and executioner, hero and heretic. Barry's reflection, in a broken Vitrum shard, showed a man he no longer recognized. The face was his, yes, but the eyes were something else. Hungry, terrified, infinite. Closing hook of Chapter 12. The galaxy no longer saw the flash. It saw the lightning that burns. A force neither fully mortal nor divine, running endlessly across streets of fire, shadow, and ash. The Imperium sought to destroy him. Chaos sought to claim him. And somewhere, deep within the warp, he felt the slow, inevitable pull of infinity, waiting to swallow him whole. For even the fastest cannot escape the horizon of destiny. The city had become unrecognizable. Spire after spire had collapsed under the weight of fire and demonic storms. Streets were rivers of ash and blood. Even the stars above seemed distant, obscured by the sickly green glow of the warp bleeding into reality. The flash ran faster than ever, faster than the world itself. And yet, every step brought him closer to the truth. There was no running. Confronted by the warp, rifts tore open before him, jagged holes to a reality of screaming colors and impossible shapes. From each rift emerged demons, drawn to his speed, their claws reaching for him with the inevitability of gravity. He tried to dodge, to weave between them. He moved faster than sight, but the warp did not measure speed as mortals do. It measured inevitability. The whispers were now a chorus, chanting from inside his own mind. You cannot outrun what you are. You are ours. You always were. Clash with the Imperium behind him. The Imperium had gathered what remained of its forces. The Arbites, the Inquisition, even a detachment of Sisters of Battle, all marched to stop him. Seeing only a heretic in red. Flamers spat fire. Bolters tore holes through metal and stone. And yet he ran, moving faster than bullets could travel, deflecting beams with sheer momentum, scattering enemies like leaves in a storm. But every life he saved was counted. Every strike he delivered became another story of death and destruction. The Imperium was relentless. The warp was patient. And he, once Barry Allen, was trapped between both. The moment of choice, a rift opened beneath the Grand Plaza, a chasm of infinite violet and green, swirling with screaming faces and hands reaching out. The whispers told him to leap, step through, become more than mortal, become infinite. Join us. The crowd below, the cultists, the innocent he had tried to save, cried out for him to turn back. Don't go. You're our only hope. But there was no hope in this universe. There was only motion, only consequence. Barry paused, chest heaving, lightning crackling across his form, and he realized the truth he had been running from. His speed could not save the galaxy. It could only carry him into its destruction. The leap he ran toward the rift, faster than thought, faster than fear, faster than time itself. Reality bent around him. The ground shattered. Shadows became flesh. The screams of thousands echoed in every heartbeat. And then he leaped, not into victory, not into salvation, but into the storm itself. The warp swallowed him whole. Aftermath, the hive fell silent. The cult of the lightning saint vanished. Survivors whispered of a red streak that had appeared, fought, and then disappeared, leaving nothing but ash, scorched earth, and legend. The Imperium recorded him as an anomaly. The cultists whispered he had been claimed by the warp, and somewhere, deep within the infinite chaos of the universe, a speed force once pure had been fractured, feeding both horror and myth in equal measure. The galaxy did not mourn him. It barely remembered his name. Closing hook of Chapter 13. The Flash was gone. Barry Allen was gone. All that remained was the myth, the lightning that burns, running forever in stories, whispers, and nightmares. And the 41st millennium continued, indifferent, eternal, and cruel. The hive was quiet now, not peaceful, quiet. Smoke curled from broken spires. Ash floated in the air like snow. The scent of burned flesh and promethium clung to every corner. The people whispered stories, stories of a man who ran faster than thought, faster than hope, faster than the universe itself. But he was gone. Myth becomes reality. In the weeks that followed, the legends grew. Children swore they saw him in the flicker of lightning. Cultists carved his lightning bolt into their flesh, praying to a god who had never asked to be worshipped. Soldiers cursed him as a heretic who had torn their world apart in the blink of an eye. The Imperium recorded him as an anomaly, a cautionary tale of what happens when a mortal intrudes upon forces too vast to comprehend. And the warp laughed, for even in death, in disappearance, Barry Allen had left a scar across the galaxy, a wound that would never heal. The true cost: the Flash had tried to save the innocent. He had tried to outrun death. He had tried to bring hope, but in the 41st millennium, hope is not a gift. It is a weapon against you. Families were destroyed. Innocents burned. Cults formed in his name. Reality itself bent around him, leaving nothing pure, nothing untouched. Even his speed, his greatest gift, had become a curse. The lesson of motion: the galaxy does not care for heroes. It does not bend for the fastest. Time itself is a predator, and all who run are eventually consumed. Barry Allen learned, too late, that salvation is an illusion, that even the brightest lightning fades, and that the faster you run, the more lives you touch, and the more suffering follows. The Imperium endured, chaos spread, and somewhere, Beyond mortal perception, a red streak of lightning ran forever, feeding both legend and nightmare. Final reflection: what happens when the Flash lands in Warhammer40K? He runs, he fights, he saves, and in the end, he disappears. The galaxy forgets the man. The warp remembers the storm, and the universe moves on, indifferent to speed, heroism, or tragedy. We endure until we cannot. Even the fastest man alive is not exempt. And that is the story of the lightning that burns. The hive was no longer a city. It was a memory made solid. Towers twisted, streets shattered, smoke thick as blood. Every survivor carried the imprint of his passage, a streak of red, a whisper of lightning, a lingering fear that faster than death does not mean safe. The cult of the Lightning Saint expands. Whispers became doctrine. The cult of the Lightning Saint spread to other sectors. In the Underhive, children ran along the walls, mimicking the impossible speed they would never possess. In Manufactoria and barracks, workers left small tokens of red cloth, praying for deliverance that would never come. They no longer saw Barry as a man. They saw him as inevitability, a god who ran so fast he could never be reached, yet demanded obedience simply by existing. The Imperium tightens its grip. The Inquisition, frustrated by his disappearance, declared the entire hive heretical. Regiments were dispatched to purge the heresy, and thousands more died in the ensuing raids. Flamers, bolters, and orbital strikes carved the city into ash, yet the myth persisted. Every survivor whispered his name with awe or fear. Every corpse left behind was counted as a lesson. The Red Angel comes, and none escape his judgment. Even posthumously, chaos stirs in the warp. The whispers multiplied. The red streak had become a beacon, a lighthouse of speed and power. Demons followed it, some curious, some hungry. Cultists interpreted visions of him in dreams as prophecy, believing the Lightning Saint would return to tear open the Imperium itself. The Flash's actions had seeded corruption without intending to. Even his attempts to save lives only fueled the spread of chaos, bending mortal perception into devotion, worship, and fear. The weight of legend Barry Allen no longer existed as a person. The Flash was gone. What remained was a name, a myth, a streak of red in the minds of men and gods alike, and yet the lessons lingered. Speed is meaningless where faith, fear, and cruelty govern. Even the fastest cannot outrun consequence, and a single act of heroism can be twisted into both hope and horror. Closing hook of Chapter 15. The Lightning Saint ran forever, not in flesh, but in memory. His speed was eternal, his impact irreversible, and his name whispered as both warning and prayer. The hive endured, but it had changed forever, and the galaxy watched, indifferent, eternal, and cruel.